Glenn Beck.
Dinesh D'Souza, #1 best-selling author, new book, Stealing America, What My Experience with Criminal Gangs Taught Me About Obama, Hillary, and the Democratic Party. Dinesh, welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
Glenn, always a pleasure.
Can you explain to me, when I watched Barack Obama, and I assume you saw him in Turkey this week.
Yes.
When America and everybody's heart was breaking, and this is our ally, this is France, you know, this is one of our strongest allies. And everybody, the emotion was pouring out, and I've never seen Barack Obama more Ben Carson-like. You know, he spoke, and it was like, and you know, this was a really bad setback. There wasn't any emotion there. There was no outrage. There was no passion.
He was reading from his tax return, in effect.
Yes. Can you explain? Did you see that? And can you explain
I saw that, and I actually noted the astonishing contrast with Hollande. In fact, Hollande started out a lot like Obama. He's been actually very receptive. He's been condemning earlier Islamophobia and so on. But the moment there's blood on the street, Hollande sounds like Winston Churchill.
Yes.
He starts using the language of civilization against barbarism. He says things like, we will be merciless. Obama, on the other hand, sounds like Obama. And I think this is actually an indication of modern progressivism, because I think we saw it similarly with Hillary in Benghazi. And here's what I mean. These guys appear to be annoyed when there is a foreign policy crisis. A little bit, they feel like that's a distraction. Why are you bothering me with that? I've got more important things to do. So one reason I wrote this book, Stealing America, is my argument is the progressives are busy domestically stealing the wealth of America. That's what animates them. That's what motivates them. They do get animated when they are blocked from doing that by Republicans. But on the other hand, all this other stuff happening abroad is no more interesting to them than thieves who are robbing a bank would be interested in news reports that the overall security, external security of the bank is threatened, or that there are bad macroeconomic effects from stealing from a bank. They're looting the bank, and that's what they care about.
So when he's bringing in the Syrians, he's not passionate about the security of the United States, but boy, he is passionate about bringing the Syrians in.
Yeah, and he's passionate about making the point that there should not be a distinction between Islam and Christianity. Notice that his voice gets a certain emotionalism in condemning those who say that, for example, Syrian Christians are less likely to become Islamic radicals than Syrian Muslims. I mean, you'd think it would be obvious that a Syrian Christian would be less vulnerable to the siren call of Islamic radicalism. But for Obama, that is an offensive, annoying, irritating thing to say, and he'll attack it. That's what gets him charged up.
Do you have, Pat, do you have the speech where he said, hey, we've got to, you know, Christians have a responsibility and Muslims have to do this, and you know, ask why their kids are being indoctrinated? You know that from the speech on Thursday.
Is it the one where he was talking about there shouldn't be a religious test?
Yeah, I think so. Do you have that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, listen to this. I think this is it. I want to get your opinion on this, if this is the right cut. Do you have it?
Or do I have it? I thought I did.
Okay.
Let me see.
You look for it.
Yeah.
Is there a stealing of America happening with the Syrian refugees?
Well, just if I could make a point on this religious business, imagine if there were a group of Christians somewhere in the world who were very pious and very serious about their faith, and in the name of their faith were committing massacres, were committing bombings, were engaging in mass violence. Do you think that Obama would show 1 minute of reluctance to call those Christian extremists?
No.
Of course not.
Not at all.
So there's a double standard here. And behind every double standard, there's usually a single standard. And so it seems to me that Obama's single standard is he's got this systematic preference for Islam over Christianity. And it exposes itself in the very differential way in which he treats the two faiths.
Well, he also says that we shouldn't jump to any conclusions. Yet, I don't have all the facts, and the police acted stupidly. I don't have all the facts, but we know what happened in Ferguson. I don't have all the facts, but we have to act now because there was another shooting today. I mean, he is quick to assign the blame everywhere But he always comes out after one of these events and says, now, wait a minute, let's slow down. Let's not be crazy. Let's not do anything rash because you always make mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's right. Obama is the most animated when he is attacking Republicans, conservatives, and Christians. Those are the three groups that really get his goat. Foreign policy threats to him, he always takes the statesman-like above the fray stance. Now, the Stealing America that you asked me about, I think, is an escalation from what liberalism was about before. By an escalation, what I mean is we're now seeing an effort on the part of the progressives to put their hands not just on the wealth of the government, the $3 trillion in the federal budget, for example, but to extend their control over all the wealth of the private economy. We've seen under Obama, for example, major industries, banking, insurance, automobiles, healthcare, now increasingly energy. They're trying to establish federal control over the private sector.
When I saw the president was out to talk about global warming and yet another scheme, and it was, what is it, $14 trillion a year, this scheme for global warming. All I could think of was, you're just stealing the wealth. That's all you're doing.
I mean, Obama doesn't know or care whether the earth is getting hotter or colder. He has no idea. But he sees it as a wonderful opportunity in order to make headway in the Stealing America project. Part of what I learned in the confinement center, Glenn, was we tend to look at these as arguments, as debates.
Hold on just a second. I want to explain. When he says, when I was in the confinement center, I mean, you want to talk about taking lemons and making it into lemonade. Correct me if I'm wrong, you got the premise of this book by being incarcerated, and you were in jail with hardened criminals and thieves and murderers and rapists and everything else, and you're like, I recognize this is the Democratic Party.
Well, I began to learn the way they operate.
Right.
They'd give me a sales pitch, and they'd say, well, that's our pitch. If we're trying to rob a house, we need to get the homeowner to lift the latch off the door. So we've got to sweet talk him into doing that. Now, the moment he lifts the latch off the door, we can kick in the door and go in. But the pitch creates the element of momentary trust that allows the scam to go forward. So I now begin to see a lot of what happens in American politics. Obamacare, this whole business about Obama giving you rebates on your college loans. These are all wonderful scams. I mean, let's look for a moment at this college thing. Obama says to young people, I'm going to forgive your college loans, or I'm going to make it not required for you to pay them back. I'm going to give you free college. Now think about that. How's he going to do that? Well, the federal government has to pay for it because nothing's free. You have to pay professors and pay for buildings and so on. So Obama and the government doesn't have the money, so they're going to borrow from the national debt. The national debt is going to go up. Now, who's going to pay that national debt? Who's going to inherit it? The same young people who are the beneficiaries of Obama's munificence. So what Obama's really doing is he's taking money from young people from their own future earnings or from their own back pocket and giving it to them. But he's making himself into be the philanthropist. Obviously, it's not his money. It's their money. So it's not, Glenn, it's not even robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's robbing Paul to pay Paul.
Unbelievable. Do you have that audio by any chance, Pat?
I think this is it.
Okay.
Yeah,
see if you can play this. Because I noticed that somebody sent this to me last night, and I want you to hear this. Do you have it? Or should I take a break?
Yeah, it's not playing. So
okay, take a break. Let me take a break, and then right back with Dinesh. Just
on air, online, in your pocket. Find out all the ways to listen at theblaze.com/radio.
Dinesh, you don't believe that the president is a Muslim, do you?
No.
Okay, neither do I. But I do think he identifies with the Muslims more than he does with the American culture. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. I think that I notice a more hospitable tone, as if whenever he's dealing with Islam, he's trying to understand it. He wants to see it from within, so to speak, an effort he never makes when he's dealing with Christianity, even though he's a purported Christian.
So now there are people that say this is proof that he's a Muslim. I don't think that at all. But I do think this shows him relating to that culture more than the Christian culture. Listen to this.
And non-Muslims cannot stereotype, but I also think the Muslim community has to think about how we make sure that children are not being infected with this twisted notion that somehow they can kill innocent people.
Stop. So you notice he says the Christian community needs to do this, but the Muslims, we need to think this way. And I don't think that means he's a Muslim. I just think he has so much empathy for that he includes himself in that culture much more. He relates to that culture much more than, let's say, the Judeo-Christian culture.
It's a very strange thing, but I think that's true. I think that is part of the anti-colonial alienation from America, a sense that we are the bad guys who have been mistreating them.
Yes.
Their sins are essentially a reaction to our sins, and therefore they are a victimized culture that should be treated sympathetically, whereas his own culture, American culture, should be treated ruthlessly. So I think that's actually right. I also think that his ideological goal is to withdraw American influence from the Middle East and shrink it in the world. Now, that's created the vacuum in which ISIS has become so powerful. So there's a kind of weird dovetailing of agendas between Obama and what's going on with radical Islam. Obama wants to subtract and pull back, and the radical Muslims want to multiply and grow strong. And the two are operating as a kind of scissors motion.
How much different would it be with Hillary Clinton in office?
I think the difference between Obama and Clinton both have a kind of gangsterish element to them, and I think it comes out of the gangster-tutored Saul Alinsky, who was their joint mentor. Now, that being said, I think with Obama, it's ideological goals and gangsterism in the means. So, for example, Obama's perfectly happy. If he wants to get more illegals in the country, he's happy to skirt the immigration laws, ignore what Congress is saying, work around the courts. There's a kind of lawlessness there, but it's a lawlessness of means to get to an end that is ideological. I think with Hillary, with both the Clintons, ultimately it's primarily about money and power. I mean, we scorn Hillary for saying we started out broke, but the truth is the Clintons did start out with nothing, and they have gone from 0 to 200 million at warp speed, and the Clinton Foundation has accumulated many times that pile of money. Now, how do you do that? They didn't invent the iPhone. They didn't create any kind of wealth or sell any kind of stuff that anybody wants to buy. They got rich through politics. This is something people do, by the way, all the time in the third world. They come into politics and they become multimillionaires because they play the political system for personal gain. So I think Hillary is more of a gangster in the goal. That is essentially her objective. Whereas Obama's objective is ideological, but he's willing to use corrupt and gangsterish techniques to get him to his end.
So you don't think that she agrees with Saul Alinsky, even though Saul Alinsky was a mentor of hers? She doesn't agree with Saul Alinsky, or she just only took his tactics?
Hillary improved upon Saul Alinsky. Alinsky was essentially an outside guy. So Alinsky would go to Mayor Daley in Chicago and say, listen, if you don't give me what we want, I'm going to have 500 guys occupy all the restrooms at O'Hare Airport. They'll be peeing all the time, all day, and no passengers will be able to use the restroom. So it's a kind of outsider technique of blackmailing the government or the corporations. He tried the same thing with Eastman Kodak in Rochester, New York. But Alinsky always thought you had to do that from the outside. I think what Hillary's figured out is, wait a minute, if I can get on the inside, then all these agencies of government, the SEC, the FEC, the IRS, the FBI, now become, in a sense, acorns or intimidation agencies, but intimidation agencies at my behest. So it's a radical escalation of what Alinsky thought about.
As you look at the scene and you see what's happening in our universities, you see Black Lives Matter. Can you play the audio of the provost? This is the provost of Dartmouth apologizing to the students, the Black Lives Matter students, for what they did in the library, apologizing to them that there were some that didn't join in on that protest.
So,
listen to this.
I'm very sorry about all of this. I know it doesn't help, but we received a lot of terrible calls today too, and we told them that they were all, ridiculous, and that the protest was a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Can you elaborate? What happened?
you know, people, there's a whole conservative world out there that's not very nice.
Wow. What do you think of that?
You know, 25 years ago, Glenn, I wrote Illiberal Education, which was an expose of political correctness. Yeah, the bottom line of it is the older good liberals have now retired from the campus, and you may say the lunatics are now running the asylum.
You're listening to the Glenn Beck program.
The Blaze Radio.